and welcome to Newsroom. We're coming to you live from Islamabad, and I'm Sharmeen Ali. Recently, we've been seeing tensions increasing between US and China, and particularly in recent days when a US destroyer sailed through the South China Sea, challenging China's claim to the region. Also at the UN, we're seeing that China has blocked and the US have a sort of a deadlock on a resolution, on a draft of a resolution which aims to bring about a ceasefire to all the conflicts, and a 90-day ceasefire to all the conflicts going on all over the world, so that humanitarian help and aid can get to those regions. And those are the regions afflicted with war and conflict, such as Afghanistan and Yemen, and several others on that list. But however, the differences in opinion between the United States and China about whether the WHO should be mentioned in that draft are causing a stalemate to bring that draft resolution forward. So this is happening for the last 1 month, so we'll be talking about that on our program. Also, Prime Minister Imran Khan has again asked the richer countries of the world to do more for fragile economies in the developing world. This is due to the fact that the countries in the developing world are fighting with limited healthcare resources, not only the coronavirus pandemic, which strains their already very limited healthcare systems, but also they're fighting hunger and poverty and weak sanitation conditions, etc., overpopulation. So the relief that's been given already by the G20 countries and the IMF and the World Bank are welcome, and they will help in achieving this battle against the coronavirus pandemic in these countries. However, the Prime Minister feels that more is needed to give relief to these countries. So we'll be talking about that on our program today. Also today, the world observes Labor Day, and Labor Day is a day which celebrates workers. These workers are essential to all the economies in the world, and it originated in the 8-hour movement, which asked for 8 hours of work, 8 hours of recreation, and 8 hours of rest. So this day is essential to remember that the input that workers have on all our economies is essential for the workings of our society. So we'll be moving forward now, and we'll start with the US and China situation at the moment, where it stands, and where we see what is going to come out of this. We have with us online our senior analyst, we have an international affairs expert, Raja Kaisar, who's online with us. Thank you so much, Raja Kaisar, for joining us.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, hello.
Raja Kaisar, thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Right. So we're seeing the situation with US and China again sort of coming at loggerheads with each other. We're particularly, first of all, when we begin with the start of the pandemic, we had President Donald Trump repeatedly calling this the China virus, and then in retaliation, the Chinese Foreign Ministry responded to that. And then from there on, now we're seeing that those tensions were already there. Now there's a US destroyer that sailed through the South China Sea that China claims to be its own.
Well, this is indicative of a shift in the global political landscape, and it was long coming and long overreaching. But this time, this has reached its pinnacle point, given a fact when these two global powers, one is an emerging global power and other is an established global power, they have come at a direct row to one another. And this is something which is uncharacteristic, and this is something which is going to reshape the global future, and it might reshape the world order at large. So the fact of the matter is that right now USA, it is more being led by a populist leader who is very berserk and who can actually give any statement. So that is why this saying it is China virus and China is responsible for this thing. So this was something which you can expect out of a populist leader. But to this particular development where China and USA, they both have blocked at the WHO. So that is indicative of this shift, that this rivalry or this particular animosity, it is likely to persist for now. And how this is going to unfold, well, we cannot predict it right now, but indeed we are living in an unprecedented time. Corona has changed the realities, Corona has changed all the social realities, and indeed Corona is going to change the political realities of the international world order. So this international world order, because you see the way China has actually demonstrated its strength and its robust capital in coping up with this corona pandemic, it is again something which speaks very differently of China, and the people or the countries who have been assisted by China to combat this corona pandemic. So it is again indicative of a shift that China is no more now an isolated power which was not interested in extending its influence and its flexing its muscle. So this time, indeed, they have come up with something which is bigger. This is something which where they have demonstrated their strength. So that I think this thing is going to last for long, and it will have everlasting imprints on the global political landscape.
Right. And Washington also accused Beijing of hiding and downplaying the initial outbreak.
Well, yeah, I mean that is a blame game. That is a blame game. Reason being, they particularly this United States of America, they want to scapegoat China for this pandemic, that they are responsible for this outbreak. But this is not the case. It is an epidemic which has become a pandemic. So it is something which can happen in any part of the world. A virus outbreak can start from any part of the world. So, if by the token of this argument, then United States of America can be responsible for killing of millions of people in the world wars. So, you cannot scapegoat a country for something which is, I mean, which you cannot categorically assert, or which you cannot categorically give evidence of. So that is why, I mean, these accusations of United States against China and China's rebuttal, again, it demonstrates, as I said, it is more of a global power tussle rather than the actual culprit of the pandemic. So actually,
Right,
they are
exactly.
politicizing.
Right. We're just going to include now Javed Rana, who's a senior analyst. Thank you for joining us, Javed Rana.
Thank you.
We're just talking about the blame game that's been happening between the United States and China regarding this coronavirus pandemic. And with those already existing tensions, we also are now seeing a bit of tension in the South China Sea. Javed Sab, your take on this?
Well, it has been a historical dispute between the U.S. and China, uh, dating back to World War II. And then one side of the picture is that the U.S. has been claiming that since the U.S. had an edge in this World War II, so it has a claim. The Chinese are saying that for the centuries, Chinese has been using this part of the sea. So I think beyond that, we have to see the current situation, and the current situation is hugely focused on pandemic of coronavirus, and the Americans are trying to push a political agenda whereby they can conveniently blame China for the entire mess that the world has been passing through, and to happen, I think we have already seen that the Germany has already sent an invoice of more than 150 euros to the Chinese for being responsible for the pandemic that Germany had faced. So, U.S. Secretary of State has been building up a kind of a public rhetoric, which giving a clear impression that sooner or later, Americans are engaged in a kind of a situation where they are lobbying with the Europeans, where they are lobbying with the other world leaders to bring China into focus, telling the world that the China has been the center of most of the recent pandemics and epidemics in the world. So this is the time China needs to be held responsible. I think the bigger picture is the geostrategic. The bigger picture is the economic war that has already been there between two bigger powers. And the Chinese are not alone. my understanding of the situation is that Russia also feels threatened by the kind of the rhetoric that we have seen during last couple of weeks, and Russia is certainly going to support China in this battle. And the China has been making its point that the Americans think that the West is the entire world. Most of the countries, according to the Chinese, they are with the China on this particular issue. But we have to also see a bigger picture. The bigger picture is that the major part of the world has been under lockdown, because of which the economy is in a bad shape. So developing countries, underdeveloping countries, they are looking for help from the international donor agencies. And that is where I think the Western powers, particularly the US, could exploit the third world countries to support them in blaming China when this crisis comes to an end. But certainly they will find a way out where they can blame China in a manner that it caused huge financial losses to the China. At the end of the day, they are going to ask China that, okay, since we have lost so much loss to the economy, so bear all these losses. So that is something easier said than done, given the fact that the Americans are no longer superpower. The world geopolitical landscape, the world map seems to change now, particularly
Right, exactly.
after events unfolding in the Middle East, where Russia called off the Americans' bluff on Syria, and then in the Central Asian states.
Right, Raja Kesar, I'd like to ask you at this time that now we're seeing that there's a UN Security Council draft resolution which is calling for a 90-day humanitarian pause in conflicts worldwide in the face of this pandemic. Now, the text was authored by France and Tunisia, and the UN Security Council members, the United States and China, are sort of at a deadlock going forward about mentioning the name of the WHO in this. How important is it right now to call an end to this, a 90-day pause in conflict all over the world, as the UN UN Secretary General has called for earlier as well?
Well, UN always had been ineffective when it has come to the big power rivalry. So it is something which is not very unbecoming. Reason being, United States of America, it enjoys an uncontested power and stature in the global affairs, and they have their major say in the international affairs. And the way China have managed to corner United States of America in the past few decades with its rapid economic growth and with its growing international capital, it is something which is unprecedented. It is something which has actually become a kind of threat and challenge to the hegemony of the United States of America, because you see the unipolar world order was being dominated by one country and the one hegemon, which was United States of America. So Americans, they are becoming increasingly consternated with this fact that China is rising and China is flexing its muscles and China is emerging as a global power. So this is something which is inviting multifarious avenues of confrontation between both the countries. So that is why it is going to have, as I said earlier, that grave impingings for the global order. And these all things, like this particular development which you have mentioned, they are the indicative. They are the indicative of this fact, and they are the evidence and indicators of this process which is underway at the global level. The world order is changing. You see that the emerging multipolarity is taking over the reins of the world. United States of America is declining, so that is why these kind of berserk responses, they are not very unbecoming.
Right. President Trump earlier criticized the World Health Organization's role in dealing with the pandemic, and he blamed them for a lack of transparency, and he also stopped their funding, whereas China gave more funding to the organization. And now China wants the WHO to be mentioned in this draft resolution, and the United States does not. Do you want to comment on this issue with the WHO?
This is very characteristic of Donald Trump. The way he behaves, the way he acts, the way he executes the thing. He has made media a bully in the United States of America. He often takes them to the cleaners, and he has pulled out United States of America from the Paris Peace Agreement. So, coming at loggerheads to WHO and criticizing their role and having scuttled their funding, it is not something which you can expect as something which is very highly unlikely, because Donald Trump acts in this way. He is very impulsive. He actually is very whimsical, and he can take any action arbitrarily. So that is why you're very right that the way China has come up with the assistance plan, and the way they wanted WHO to be mentioned in the draft resolution, and the way United States of America did not add that name of WHO. It tells that you see the how this issue has been politicized, how this pandemic actually, I mean, this which is emerging as a global catastrophe, and which is something which should make the world leaders more conscious, more concerned, and more considerate about its socio-economic impinging. They are more into its political point scoring, political game, and political gimmicking. So that is indeed unfortunate as well, and that is going to have, as I said, that very significant and very enduring imprints on the global political landscape.
Right. Now, this vote in the UN was supposed to be expected this week, and it's the UN Secretary General has been pushing it for about a month, and it seems like this could carry on. And at the same time, there are 20 conflict zones which are mentioned in this, including Afghanistan. And we know the situation, what's going on in Afghanistan and in Yemen, which is also mentioned, war-torn zones. There's huge humanitarian problems over there, getting medical supplies in and just relief to the people there, and simple things such as just food and nutrition.
Yeah, it will indeed become a challenge, because the world is facing very strange and very inimical times. This pandemic, it has come up as something which was unprecedented, and no one has ever conjectured about it. And to deal with it, it demands a unanimous resolve. To deal with it, it needs a consensual opinion building at the global level, because the developing countries, the conflict zones, they cannot address their issues on their own. They need a lot of assistance from these major powers, these global powers who could come to their assistance. And this disparity of the global north and global south, it will also come into play if this issue is not addressed or is not ameliorated. So that is why these world powers, they need to realize, particularly it needs, or it puts a square of the responsibility on the part of United States of America, who are the global hegemon, because the global power comes with global responsibility. Uh, they have to be globally responsible, and then they have to take the all other countries on board, and then they should assist all those countries which are at the receiving end, which are in the conflict zones. And particularly, I think Kashmir should also be taken into consideration, because it is under a lockdown for not 2 months, 3 months, but for now past 8, 10 months. So that is why this thing, it needs immediate attention, and it needs an immediate solution as well. And for that, it needs a consensual resolve. For that, United States of America will have to take the lead, and will have to take all the countries on board to address this quagmire.
Right. Thank you, Raja Kesar, for joining us on the program. And Javed Rana, coming back to you, I'd like to ask you now for your final thoughts about this. The conflict zones in the world right now, the UN Secretary General has been talking about it for a month now. He asked for a stop in any kind of conflict for 90 days so that humanitarian help can get to those areas. We see in places like Afghanistan and Yemen how dire the situation can get for those people over there. There's already fighting, civilians already losing their lives, and now because of the pandemic, they're losing even more lives. And it's basically now a matter of getting them the basic medical supplies and humanitarian aid.
Well, ideally speaking, this should happen because there is no point of delaying it. Because people in Yemen, they are dying of starvation. You look at those kids, tens of thousands of kids are dying because of the starvation. There has been blockage of these food supplies. Those have been quite disrupted. Unfortunately, Iran and the Saudi Arabia have been at loggerhead over Yemen. These are the poor Yemeni people who have been at the receiving end. In Afghanistan, I think there is more politics than the humanitarian crisis, and I really doubt that the international authorities, international global world would be able to have its influence on Taliban unless the peace agreement is implemented, because every clause in the peace agreement has been defined, and unfortunately the Americans are failing to get those implemented. But what I'm wondering about, and that is perhaps I'm not sure whether there's going to be any reference of Kashmir in UN Security Council resolution. If not, Pakistan must lobby for it. And then there are multi dimensions of Kashmir. One part is there has been a sort of skirmishes going on between India and Pakistan, and close to 1,000 now have been the violation of ceasefire line at the LOC. So, and then more importantly, I would say there has been a huge humanitarian crisis in the disputed Kashmir region from August last year till now. And there has been shortage of food supplies, shortage of medical supplies. The economy has gone from bad to the worst. There has been nearly 900,000 military and paramilitary troops who have been deployed over there to make it sure that the people don't come out, and the internet service has been disrupted. This is also one of the biggest hotspots. So let's see how world intervenes. And I really doubt that the Kashmir will have a kind of reference and mention it really deserves. And that is a clear bias of the international community when it comes to Kashmir, because they have to watch their economic interest in India. And that is something which should not be acceptable to Pakistan and the Muslim world in large.
Right. Now, if such a resolution were to be passed, what's to say that the world leaders who are in these conflict zones will heed such a call from the international community, from the United Nations, seeing that they sort of disregard UN resolutions in the past?
Of course, we cannot expect Israel that it is going to comply with the UN Security Council resolution, something they never did. They have been suppressing, killing Palestinians over there, and they have announced that they are going to basically annex 30% of the West Bank. So there's a more hunger for the Israelis to occupy more territory of the Palestine, and as we speak, they have found a kind of a best given, God-given opportunity from their perspective to annex more Palestinian territory, to implement so-called the deal of the century that President Donald Trump had announced a few months back. But again, I would like to bring your attention to Kashmir, the disputed Kashmir region. Let's hope world have they pay some attention to the Kashmir region. You know, the nature of the crisis is not very much known to the world. It has been there since August, and nothing so far has been done. My understanding of the situation is that it should not be that difficult for the world powers, particularly China and the US, to come to a consensus. But again, since Americans are hugely focused on China, they are hugely focused on how to basically exploit the situation of this pandemic to restore its economy, which was in a bad shape. It was a debt-ridden, and then blame all the mess of the Americans onto the Chinese government. And I think now UN Security Council, unfortunately, has become a stage or kind of a scuffle, political scuffles between two major powers. Let's hope that it is overshadowed and the better sense prevails.
Right. You earlier mentioned Israel as well. So the situation in Gaza at the moment, that the Gaza Strip was already under a blockade, and we know that it's a very, very densely populated area also, and it's extremely hard to get medical help in there as well. And the people have been suffering and in poverty for a very long time.
This is most unfortunate part of the tragedy. This Palestine issue is the mother of all conflicts in the world. If you go deep into this, you will find that directly or indirectly, many major conflicts started in the world because of the occupation of the Israel of Palestine. Now, now with this situation, when the Gaza, at least it has been encircled by the Israeli Navy. It has been encircled by the Israeli land forces, and unfortunately, our brothers in Egypt, they have also blocked them. So sometimes they have to dig up tunnels and go inside Egypt to bring essential food supplies, essential medical supplies. Basically, both Egypt, unfortunately, and Israel together, they have created a situation where these people are forced to surrender to the Israel, something the Palestinians would never do it. Unfortunately, Palestinians are not getting the kind of the support from the Arab world and other Muslim countries they deserve. They think it is a Palestinian problem. It is a Muslim problem. It is a Muslim
Right.
problem. Unfortunately, we are being given impression that this is an ethnic problem. It is a one Palestinian
Absolutely. Right.
ethnicity, but that is not the case.
Thank you, Javed Rana, for joining us to discuss this very important topic about conflict zones. We'll now be going on to the next very, very important topic of discussion, which is that the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Prime Minister Imran Khan, he's asked the richer countries of the world to do more to help fragile economies. And just like we were talking about conflict zones, the developing world is facing very particular challenges, such as limited healthcare resources that they have to fight this pandemic, and now because of an influx of cases, those resources are further strained, and on top of that, they're also having to fight hunger and poverty. For this discussion, we have with us Dr. Noor Fatma, who's a political economist. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now Prime Minister Imran Khan has increases, right now there's an overall increase in diplomatic efforts to initiate consultations at the UN for a collective debt relief action for developing countries. And Prime Minister Imran Khan has also stepped up his efforts to bring this about as well, because what is already happening per Prime Minister Imran Khan is not enough to help the developing countries.
Prime Minister has initiated a kind of sensitization to the world community that this is the time that the world forums and the big powers and the developed countries, they should have come forward. Unfortunately, the G20, they have been more in collaboration with the time during the time of 2008-9 recession than this time, and they had a trillion of dollars they have given at that time for this recession because it was serving their own purpose. And now at this time we can see that G20 they didn't do anything concrete so far for particularly the developing world. Only this consortium has been announced that there will be a $1 trillion dollars are there. They will be giving to the countries, particularly with the developing countries with the COVID-19 to deal with that. But the point is that is a conditional, that is a loan, and that has to be repaid. And then they have tried to also to defer the repayment. And then the requirement was much more than that. They should have actually write off the all the loans of the developing countries so that they could fight it with the ease. During a recent time, recently IMF and the World Bank, they both met. Normally, they meet in April in Washington D.C. and they have failed to come up with a concrete program for the COVID-19, and any kind of financial assistance is not being given to the developing countries. And then IMF has, of course. It is the IMF who has to take the lead. It is the G20 who has to take the lead. And the government, the Prime Minister of Pakistan has tried actually to highlight the issue that this is extraordinary situation. This is not a financial recession. This is a situation which has to be dealt with the kind of a global bads like global commons. This is a global problem. So this is a humanity problem. All the humanity has to come forward, particularly the one who has more resources. So the IMF has to come up with this. In my view, there could be two fastest step towards contribution of this COVID, particularly financial contribution from these IMF and the World Bank and the other big powers. The one could be that though we know that the oil price, oil market and the gas prices also they have now gone down and it's crashed, but still there could be a carbon taxes on the minimum use of this fuel. So carbon tax could be used for this all kind of a machinery and all kind of a help for COVID. And second, in my view, the IMF should actually restore or give a special drawing rights to the countries according to their own quota, but this should not be the normal loan with the conditionalities. They should give it without the conditionalities, and they should give according to the SDR special drawing rights, and it should be given to the countries, and they should actually withdraw from their drawing rights. So this will actually...
we also have now with us online Dr. Farida Afzal. Dr. Noor Fatma, please stay with us. Dr. Farida Afzal is an economist. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharmeen.
So we were just talking with Dr. Noor Fatma about the fact that the Prime Minister has welcomed the gestures by the G20 countries as well as the IMF for the debt sort of delayed payments, etc., restructuring. However, he's saying that for developing countries, more relief is needed because at this point, they've been given fiscal space to address the healthcare crisis. However, the economies are spiraling downward so fast that more is needed. So your take on this?
Sharmeen, I think that the world economic system on the whole is trying to grapple with these unprecedented times. So really, I think that the IMF and the World Bank itself, there are multiple opinions over there, how to deal with this kind of crisis. So certainly Pakistan has to put its own agenda first, and it has to request that some special kind of space be created for its inclusion into those countries which need the relief package the most. But you see, the relief also it can be of several kinds. For example, for the least developing countries, IMF has something called as the Catastrophe Containment and Relief Trust. But that's a very small, fund. Because Pakistan's debt burden is so high, and because we were having fiscal problems and we were having revenue collection problems even prior to this COVID crisis. So therefore, now we are trying to negotiate with the Bretton Woods institutions to somehow help us to deal with these, problems which are very, very deep-rooted. So to say, Sharmeen, that IMF and World Bank are going to be able to solve all our problems, that is not the way things work. Some part the government itself needs to utilize its resources a bit better. Definitely it needs to be talking with the IMF and World Bank. Then it also needs to be talking with other countries in the same category as Pakistan. For example, talking to Egypt at this point in time is a very good idea, and I think that the Prime Minister is talking to the Prime Minister of Egypt as well, so that there can be some kind of a package which is specific for countries which are facing this severe debt burden. but they are not
Right,
the least
okay.
developing countries.
Right, Dr. Noor Fatma. Now, the Prime Minister, as Dr. Farida Faisal said, he had a telephonic conversation with the President of Egypt, Abdul Fattah Sisi, and they talked about how they spoke of debt suspension that would probably be required by developing countries, and more measures that are needed to reboot these economies. Now, at a time when the entire world is going through the worst recession since the Great Depression, as it's being called right now internationally, the richer countries are also facing their own challenges. So do you think that there would be room for more relief to developing countries?
Yes, I think now this pandemic has actually shown us the vulnerability of global financial system, a global economic system, and the health system. And the prevalence of poverty has also reflected a kind of strength of this system and the weaknesses of this system. So there is an opportunity for us to now, the countries itself and of course, the global powers and the World Bank and IMF, that now this is opportunity for them to come forward and to help in a way that the countries who are left with the less resources, they can be given more resources. They can be now. This is again a test of IMF after the East Asian crisis. So I think, yes, I agree that IMF and the World Bank is not the whole which is needed by Pakistan. But at this time, we need liquidity, and all the developing countries, they need liquidity. And this way, the two way I have suggested already, in this way, the IMF can at least provide the liquidity to the developing world at this time, because they need money for all kind of arrangement and all kind of and this is not only the one country's problem. This is, of course, I said, as a global bad. It's come as a global bad, so it has to be taken as a global problem by the global community.
Right, Dr. Farida Faisal. Now, the Prime Minister is asking for closer collaboration with the developing countries in order to come up with a comprehensive plan, and he's going to be reaching out to other countries for a coordinated effort to achieve this. So, where do you think that this can lead? I mean, who else would he be reaching out to, and do you see this collaboration coming together?
I think the Prime Minister is already talking to, for example, the main neighbors. He has talked to the, people, the head of the state in Iran, and probably, other friendly nations, Muslim-friendly nations he has talked to already. Turkey, for example, has always supported us in whatever our issues has been. And Turkish model is very good because they also did take IMF loan at one point in time, but were able to repay it. So I think that model is something we can look at. Part of our debt, we owe our debt to a large extent to China also. So we are maybe looking for a kind of a bilateral relief from China and Saudi Arabia and other G20 countries. So G20 countries, they have already pledged support to Pakistan's case, and I suppose that is an area where there is going to be further initiative taken. Maybe some kind of resources can be mobilized. But Sharmeen, at this point, I think again that the local economy needs to pick up as quickly as possible, and we cannot afford shutdowns in the very long run. Not countries like Pakistan. Our local economy has to pick up again. Otherwise, in a month's time or so, we are going to find it very difficult to feed our people, because transfers, all right, but you cannot give these transfer over and over again. There's not enough money in the world. You have to, start opening up economic activities in these times, somehow, making some kind of SOPs or other strategies where we can keep down the COVID numbers but still open up the economy. There is no amount of debt relief which can stop spiraling down of the economy if we don't open it up in
Right.
some time, I think.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Farida Faisal, for joining us. Dr. Noor Fatma, your final remarks about this, the partial reopening of Pakistan's economy, along the lines with what Dr. Farida Faisal is saying, that is a good idea, because she's also saying that there's no amount of debt relief that can actually help us to the extent that opening up our own economy will. your
Yes,
remarks on this.
this is for me. This is quite paradoxical. The reason being that on the one side, yes, we need to open, and we have economy where we have a daily wage earner, and they are suffering the most, and we don't have even the cash to actually give them for the longer time. But on the other side, the paradoxical is that when we open more, we are actually spreading it more, and then there will be there will be chance of the collapsing of your economic or health system also. So there is a paradoxical, but we need to open it partially, and then we have to what the government says is a smart lockdown. That is very important. And at the same time, yes, without economy we cannot. And now the WHO, they are short of funds. They are going to be short of funds because the contributor of their funds is going to stop their funding also.
Right.
So
Thank
the
you, Dr.
funding
Noor
has
Fatma,
to be generated.
thank you for your input in this program. And now finally, to come to the conclusion of our program, today being Labor Day, it's a day that commemorates and celebrates the workers of the world. It started in order to celebrate their achievements, and it started, its origins were in the 8-hour movement, which includes 8 hours for work, 8 hours for recreation, and 8 hours for rest. This is a very important day right now to be observed, especially for our laborers in Pakistan, our workers in Pakistan who are particularly vulnerable and facing a lot of difficulty at this time due to the lockdown. And it's very important that we think of them and appreciate them for their role. They're essential for the running of our economy as well as for all the economies of the world. That's all the time we have for our program today. Thank you for watching Newsroom, and we'll see you next time.